What's up, Unlocking Your Inner Strength listeners? How would you like to know how much your time is actually worth in monetary value? And I'll give you a hint. If you don't know this, you're pissing away a lot of your valuable time. Well, I have good news for you. I've put together a special report about time mastery that's normally $45, but since you're a loyal listener to the show, you can get it for only $10 at unlockingyourinnerstrength.com/time.
You're listening to The Inner Strength Show. If you want to step into your greatness, you've come to the right place. Here is your host, the human strength expert, Kyle Newell.
Great day once again, everybody. Thank you for tuning in once again. This is Kyle from Unlocking Your Inner Strength and unlockingyourinnerstrength.com. I have a cool episode planned for you today. Back in 1998, when I was a senior in high school, I purchased a book through a magazine when people still ordered stuff through magazines. And the book's name was Big Beyond Belief. The book was written by Leo Costa and Tom Platz. As I was sitting there reading the advertisement for this book, it hooked me that this program was going to help me put on muscle size. At that stage of my life, that's what I was after. That's what I wanted. I wanted to become bigger and stronger. And that was probably rooted in a lack of confidence and possibly me wanting to become more attractive to the opposite sex. But no matter what the reason was, this book, when it arrived, Big Beyond Belief, was fantastic. I devoured it within 2 days. Then I reread it, then I reread it, then I reread it. The whole premise of Big Beyond Belief was full body training, and it was learning how the nervous system works. When discussing how the nervous system works, you have to look at the stress response. So I was exposed to the stress response of the human body at a very young age in terms of understanding what happens when you apply stress to the body. Alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. Those are the three phases. To get stronger and to grow more muscular, we need to alarm the system and allow it to resist, which is where you adapt. When we overdo things in life, we enter the exhaustion phase, and that's when the immune system's down and you're burnt out and overtrained. One of the main things I remember from Big Beyond Belief, and I actually have it sitting right over there on the bookshelf, I can see it from here, was the idea of ranking different types of exercises based on neural or nervous system activation. One of the things the two authors said was that any exercise in which your body is moving through space ranks the highest. I want you to think about a pull-up versus a pull-down. Which one has a higher level of nervous system recruitment? If you answered the pull-up, you'd be correct. Your body is moving through space, three-dimensional space. Much more stimulation is being applied to the brain as well, I might add. This idea of training full body and varying my reps in the different phases, I went through 2-week phases with each program, was life-changing for me. My workouts became shorter. However, I was able to train each body part and movement more frequently. Now let's fast forward to when I went to college. I still had a much better grasp of the body than the upperclassmen that I would run into at the fitness center, the football players, and all those types of people. It was tricky to implement my workouts because the student center was not that big at the University of Delaware at the time, and I was bouncing from exercise to exercise trying to make this work. Throughout my freshman year and sophomore year, I put on a significant amount of weight. Not all good weight, but I did get stronger and I did put on muscle. So I began to continue molding this way of working out and making it my own. It was so far out there at the time in the late 90s that people would ask me, what are you doing? How can you train squats every day? How can you train bench press every day? I would briefly explain to them and then realize they didn't really want to know why I could train like that. So I saved my breath. The years went by, graduated college 2003, and I started working with the Rutgers football strength and conditioning program, as many of you know, with my now good friend Jay Butler, who was a mentor for me. I had a bodybuilding background in terms of my interest. I had a different style of training to put on size in terms of being full body. the next step, I was introduced to how these football players were training. Yes, they had great genetics. Some of these guys were freaks, but they too trained multiple movement patterns in innovative ways during each workout. After witnessing that, I began to merge that with a more traditional bodybuilding approach for the reason none other than I decided I would enter my first bodybuilding show the next spring. So I got ready for that first bodybuilding show in 2004 by training with the rudimentary or the foundations of how I now train, which was train each body part or movement more than once a week, combine it with other things, push the pace. And I did well my first few bodybuilding shows. I did well. I was putting on a lot of muscle. I was able to get fairly lean. And then I kind of started getting bored with my training. I took a few years off from competing in bodybuilding because of the mysterious illness I had at the time, which affected me for 2+ years. And I've talked about that in another episode. That whole experience changed my life for the better, though, and I was able to realize that in the moment. When I decided to come back to compete in bodybuilding, I started reading this coach's articles, and this coach was named Scott Abel. Scott still has to this day had the biggest influence on my training philosophy and coaching philosophy, I might add. That's what drew me into Scott, was his outside-the-box thinking and connecting the mind, body, and the spirit. Scott trained me for the next 3 or so years, and the biggest principle as far as training was the idea of metabolic enhancement training and training for oxygen debt. You see, most people, and doctors included, don't understand how the cardiovascular system works when it comes to the muscular system. Muscle drives the cardiovascular system. The more muscle you can work, the harder you can work it, the more you're going to drive the cardiovascular system. Thus, I no longer needed to do stupid, boring cardio, which I was brainwashed into doing for my first few contests because I had improper coaching, which shows you the value of having a great coach on your side. Let me go a little deeper with that. If you don't have a great coach, you're going to be fed information and protocols that were copied from somewhere else that particular coach can't explain to you, has no idea why you're doing it, and they will apply the overwork model. And overworking when it comes to coaching, just driving somebody into the ground, is just a cover up for their ignorance. There's not many good coaches out there when you compare the ratios of bad coaches versus good coaches. So make sure you find yourself a good coach. Metabolic enhancement training was all based around relatively heavy weights. I say relatively because we're all going to use different weights, but it has to be heavy for you. Fast pace, training head to toe, and peripheral heart action, meaning we wanted blood pumping all over the body. Just sitting there doing a set of bicep curls will no longer suffice. I also learned a great deal from Scott about nutrition, as well as the next guy I'm going to talk about, which I will go into in the next episode, because I think that goes hand in hand with this. With Scott's guidance, I then began to really carve out how I wanted to train my clients and continue training myself. I was able to mold this philosophy and this approach to fit any type of client. For example, I came up with bodybuilding hybrid programs, metabolic enhancement training programs, athletic development programs based around my philosophy, which I'm going to wrap up here after I talk about Mr. John Meadows, who was a very influential coach in my life as well. John had a very holistic approach. Because of his background, he had his colon removed. He was very health focused while competing at a very high level of bodybuilding. The great thing that John did through all the programs he had me on was the innovation, which built upon what Scott had taught me, which is part of my training philosophy. I have a quote here from none other than Mark Twain. It says, "In writing plays, the chief thing is novelty. The world grows tired of solid forms in all the arts." That was in his Henry Irving speech. Let me repeat that. In writing plays, the chief thing is novelty. The world grows tired of solid forms in all the arts. I want you to focus in on novelty. Novelty is the greatest aphrodisiac for the human brain. I'm not talking about aphrodisiac in sexual terms, although that is a big reason why couples break up if one cheats on the other. The idea of something new is very enticing to the mind, but we will not go down that path, even though I have a lot of views on that. Won't go down it today, I should say. What's up, Unlocking Your Inner Strength listeners? How would you like to know how much your time is actually worth in monetary value? And I'll give you a hint. If you don't know this, you're pissing away a lot of your valuable time. Well, I have good news for you. I've put together a special report about time mastery that's normally $45, but since you're a loyal listener to the show, you can get it for only $10 at unlockingyourinnerstrength.com/time. So now we come to a few years ago. I'd also been exposed to and spoke to numerous times Louis Simmons, in my opinion, the greatest strength coach who ever lived. But as far as developing raw strength, books like Dinosaur Training were very influential in my training philosophy. Training brutally, training hard, training to your limits, the outer limits of your comfort zone and beyond, which I've had to modify over the years as Newell Strength has grown. Not for myself, because I still train a certain way with a certain belief, but as the business has grown and it's had a wider reach, you got to keep the core elements while remembering that most people don't want to train brutally and with the savage intensity or feel like their heart is going to explode. And that's fine. Let me boil down I have 4 things here, principles for my training programs. Then I'll give you an example of one of my workouts, which I will do tomorrow, which is the last week of this particular workout that I've written for myself, and then I'll develop the next phase. The first thing is full range of motion. It drives me insane when I see people doing half reps on push-ups, on dumbbell bench, on squats. There's a few reasons that drives me insane. The first one is that the way you keep a joint mobile and healthy and young is to take it through a full range of motion. When you take a joint through a full range of motion, you wash it in what's called synovial fluid, which I always said was like WD-40 for the joint. If you want to develop maximum strength, we need to access what's called neural innervation. Get the whole range of motion with that particular movement pattern to develop it optimally and fully. If you want to develop muscle, you need to take the musculature, I should say, that you're working and go through a full range of motion, which is going to allow more time under tension. And time under tension is key for growing your muscles. So full range of motion. The next thing is peripheral heart action. I do not believe in doing a set and sitting there. Doing a set and sitting there. That is not an efficient way to train. It's not a very heart-pounding way to train. However, it is better than doing nothing. I'll say that. Peripheral heart action, you want the blood pumping head to toe. I believe in strength and conditioning, not strength and then go do conditioning for an hour on the hamster wheel that's known as the treadmill or the elliptical. The way I measure peripheral heart action is that as soon as I can have a conversation with somebody or have the ability to have a conversation with somebody, I've got to get moving again. I want to aim for oxygen debt. Oxygen debt, working at that level where you're always not fully at your capacity as far as being able to catch your breath. That's where I believe most people should train. Once again, it's all relative. If you're a novice, you can still train for oxygen debt. It's going to require a lot less movement to get to your oxygen debt. But rather than me telling you to rest 30 seconds in between sets, you can just measure your oxygen debt by the simple fact, am I still huffing and puffing? Is my heart pounding? Can I have a conversation? Yes, I can have a conversation. Okay, that means I should go again. The next thing is progressive overload. This is the fundamental thing with reps and sets and the foundation for all strength training. Progressive overload means you're constantly trying to better yourself, whether it's one more rep with the same weight, whether it's more volume, meaning you did more sets and reps, or in its most pure form, did your strength go up? I'm always setting strength goals for myself, which I believe is very important as we age, to send the message to your brain and body that you're not going to sit idly by and age without putting up a fight. As we age, our muscle wants to come off of us. If we don't have enough weight-bearing activity, our bones begin to wither. Body composition changes. Power and strength go down. I don't accept that. I accept it as a human condition, but I don't accept that we have to accept it without doing anything about it. If you go to any gym in America, especially the big box gyms, you're going to see people doing the same stuff, workout after workout, the same patterns, and the same weight. Once again, this is better than doing nothing. But you have to ask yourself, how can you be using 100 pounds the entire year? The body has adapted long ago once you used it for the first time. Now you have to move on. So the principle of progressive overload. The last thing that is not talked about by hardly anybody, which goes back to the Mark Twain quote I just read about novelty, is this idea of mind stimulation. Scott, Abel, and John Meadows influenced me greatly with that concept of keeping things fresh for the mind. The body will actually only adapt to a certain form of exercise. Let's say push-ups or your pushing movement or your chest movement. It takes 6 weeks for the body to adapt to that. It adapts to reps and sets much quicker. However, for the human mind, it loves novelty. So you constantly, or I constantly have to, every 3 weeks, change my plan to keep me mentally engaged, to put my theories to the test, to train my mind in a new way, to train my nervous system in a new way. When we train, here's what you have to remember what's going on. I want you to picture a sand hill, a mountain of sand, and you have a cup of water. You continue to pour the cup of water after you refill it at the same angle down the hill. What's going to happen is you're going to have the water trickle down the same grooves, and those grooves are going to get deeper. That's known as innervation training. Well, if we change our angle of the exercise, change the range of motion, or the plane of motion that we're training in, you're going to create new patterns. I'm constantly on the exploration and adventure of creating new grooves within my muscular and nervous system and brain. It all ties together. So there you have it. Those are my training principles. And come to think of it, it's not my training philosophy. You can't prove a training philosophy. However, you can prove principles, and these have worked time and time again for myself and the many, many hundreds and thousands of clients we've had throughout the years. Big Beyond Belief, great book. If you can still find it, I doubt it's still in print. You might be able to pick it up on Amazon or eBay. Check out John Meadows, got some awesome information. Check out Scott Abel, awesome information. And remember, full range of motion, peripheral heart action, progressive overload, and stimulating your mind, the principle of novelty when it comes to your workouts. I greatly appreciate you listening once again. I'd love it even more if you can tell a friend about the podcast. Leave a review if you haven't yet. I know we've been sitting around 17 reviews for quite some while, so I need some more of you to review it and rate it on iTunes. And I'll be back next episode with my nutrition principles and how I came up with them, and really going into some aspects that I haven't talked too much about on this show, and that I don't talk too much with most people about, because most people are in this mindset of treating their nutrition like it's a religion, which means you have to be careful how you go about giving people advice on that. So thanks again. Peace. Be back next week with episode number 36.
You've been listening to The Inner Strength Show. If you enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe, rate, and review us in iTunes.